We've got so far 71 people on our broadcast, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar. Thank you again for joining us today. This is the welcome to our Rethinking and Reworking of Your Medical Aesthetic Business Beyond the COVID-19 Crisis. Today I'm joined by Kenji Greenberg. If you don't mind giving us an overview of who you are, Kenji.
Sure. My name's Kenji Greenberg. I'm a partner with Medical Dental Consultants. So we are a CPA and business consulting firm specializing in assisting healthcare professionals. So we work primarily with a lot of privately held practices with a focus on providing financial practice and tax management services.
Great. Thank you, Kenji. Don Rainone, please introduce yourself.
I'm Don Rainone. Hi, I'm a board certified internal medicine MD with an aesthetic practice for the past 19 years and a training business for the last 7 years with a background in sales, administration, executive leadership, innovations, and happy to have you all on the call today.
Thank you, Dr. Rainone. And Lara Simondi.
Hi, I'm Lara Simondi of Infinite Beauty Lounge, and thank you for inviting me today. I'm looking forward to sharing some of my thoughts. And I'm the non-physician of the group. I'm a certified nurse midwife by profession, and I've been in the medical aesthetics field now for about 9 years.
Great, excellent. And Dr. Michael Tantilo.
Hi, thanks, Blake. I'm Mike Tantilo. I'm a plastic surgeon in the Boston area. Been in practice here about 20 years. I have a private practice in Chestnut Hill. I have a co-ownership position in 2 medical spas in the area, and I am medical director of Vansanity.
Great, thank you. And I'm Blake Mosher. I'm one of the co-founders of Vansanity. I also act as the director of marketing. Right now, we are going to jump into our Q&A. First, I want to open up to the panel. Let's talk about where we were with medical aesthetics leading up to COVID-19's pandemic. What were your expectations for 2020? What was your business doing? What were your perspectives?
Who wants to take that? I mean, I want to say that first of all, I joined Vansanity in October, which was, so I just kind of was getting going. And actually February was my best month ever. And I think I was partly because of the laser. Being able to add the laser to my practice was huge. So the way I kind of came to be introduced to Vansanity, it's pretty interesting. I mean, even the way I got into medical aesthetics, obviously it was my 3rd career. I started off, I was a nurse for 7 years, and then I became a certified nurse midwife, and I've been practicing for 22 years. And then I started transitioning into the field of medical aesthetics in my 40s, because basically just out of my own vanity, really, that I didn't feel like I looked the way I felt inside. So I wanted to match the outside, and I started getting into aesthetics. And then I, initially saw a plastic surgeon for my own treatments, and then realized that there was a niche where there were other non-physician, other medical practitioners that were getting involved in aesthetics. And, medical aesthetics was not involved like 30 years ago when I got into practice. So this is, over the years, I've seen a huge rise in the number of non-physicians, nurse practitioners, nurses, PAs that have gotten into the field of medical aesthetics. And I have an interesting background in that when I got into medical aesthetics, I did buy an existing med spa. So I have the perspective of owning a med spa and all the responsibility and stress that goes along with having an expensive lease, owning a laser, having employees, payroll, marketing, doing all the stuff that you have to do for a big practice. So when I, was introduced to Vansanity, and I think I'm been asked to be on this call because I do have that perspective of being now in solo practice, and having a space that they will just, Vansanity provides you this beautiful space, aesthetically very pleasing and clean and gorgeous, professional, that you can invite your clients to, and people really love it. And it's really kind of low risk with high return, because you can work as much as you want or as little as you want, and you can grow your practice however you want to do that.
Some good points. Dr. Rainone, I know you have a vibrant practice. What were What were your projections for 2020 compared to previous years? Where do you think the industry was headed? And we kind of experienced somewhat of a screeching halt leading up to COVID-19. I think we were expecting historical growth to occur this year. That we've definitely seen a curve up in patient demand, customer demand for aesthetic services. What were your experiences leading up to this event?
I mean, we look at data year over year for the practice, and we were, obviously, like everyone else, experiencing exponential growth, growth that looked like it had no end in sight. It was just, consumer confidence at an all-time high. People were starting to sign up for more and more work, more trusting of trying this or that, or higher syringe counts with fillers, and it was, practice was robust. I think everyone was riding the Acela train at 95 miles an hour, and ready for a really good year. So yeah, this was hitting the brick wall for everyone.
Right, and Dr. Tantilo, your practice, what kind of procedures were you doing? Where was the demand?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar concept to what Lara and Dr. said. It was off to it. Another great year, another growth year for procedures and non-invasive medical aesthetics. And we hit a cycle. This obviously was this is a once in a century cycle, but we hit a cycle like we hit every 10, 12 years, and this more dramatic. So early 2020 growth, followed by for aesthetics, all non-essential businesses, an abrupt stop.
Right. We're certainly in a crisis where we find ourselves. Many people have been furloughed. Certainly, we're in a position where we cannot even treat our patients as we normally would. And we're going to see a number of changes come from that. So I want to transition from, this concept of exponential growth leading up to where we were in aesthetics to now screeching halt. Patients can't even come into your practice. And I want to talk about what can we do now while we're still at home? How can we continue to think about the future? What can we do to connect with our patients? What are some efforts that you might be doing, such as staying in contact with your customers, perhaps even lining up future services and scheduling those services? What is your plan starting now, getting back in front of your customers?
And to go
go ahead.
I was just going to say, to go off Blake's comment, the big overall theme we're going to be touched upon today is just being flexible and adapting to change. So we're navigating these unique times, and we're going to want to keep in mind some common issues and considerations you may encounter. So it's as Blake has mentioned, you're going to want to be, it's critical to communicate openly with your patients about the status of your operations, what protective measures you're implementing, how they be protected when they visit your practice. And if available and appropriate, discuss, potential alternatives, something that we're seeing in a lot of practices, not necessarily maybe in aesthetics, but the rise in telemedicine and how that's becoming a tool that's become really useful for a lot of practitioners. So ultimately, we're going to be thinking about ways going forward to help reassure patients who might be reluctant to patronize any of your practices.
Lara, you and I have had conversations about how your customers are already reaching out to you about, hey, I want your services. How are you managing those conversations now and ensuring that customer is going to be there in the future?
Yeah. So again, being part of a small boutique practice is I have a personal relationships with all of my clients, and so I know them. I'm in touch with them on a regular basis, reminding them, oh, it's is it time for a refresh? But during this whole pandemic, certainly I've gotten a lot of emergency texts from people saying, oh my God, my face is falling. I need to see. This is terrible. How much longer can I be the first one on your list? When are you opening? And so speaking to that, we've had different dates, right? It was by April 6th, perhaps, so we were going to be reopening. Then it was pushed to May 4th, and now it's pushed to May 18th. So I really hesitate because, I did book a few patients thinking I could maybe get back in April, and then I had to cancel, and same thing. So I think that I hesitate to say to somebody, well, let's put you on the schedule, because we do have to be flexible. It's a very fluid situation. It is changing all the time. So I feel like it's really important to stay in contact with people. So sometimes I randomly will text somebody that I've thought of, and just reach out, how are you doing? Are you staying safe? You know, that kind of thing, appreciating it. And I did like a little bit of an informal poll to some patients that I had scheduled for halos, you know, in those few weeks, the first week, you know, the end of March when everything got shut down. And I kind of reached out to them saying, hey, you know, I'm being part of this webinar, and I'm interested to know, are you going to be interested in doing these procedures once this is over? And it was a 50-50, because, you know, I did have some clients that said, you know, I've been furloughed. I'm taking care of some family members financially. I have to help. So there are people who have some serious money concerns. Other clients that were like, hell no, as soon as I can, I want to do it.
Right.
Others were, you know what, actually the summer's coming, so I might defer it until, you know, October, November, at a later date, which,
Right.
you know, I think is appropriate too.
Are any of you actively reaching out to your customer base right now, saying, hey, this is when I expect to get back to work, and scheduling any procedures at this point?
I think that everybody should be staying in touch, and I think that everyone's done a good job of that. At least that's what appears to be on social media. I think more than ever, you need to tighten the bonds with fierce loyalty from your existing patient base. You know, and a lot of that is going to come down to on some other marketing calls I've been on, you know, not unique to aesthetics business, but they're saying that authenticity and empathy will be very important. That is not telling them what they can do for you to keep your practice going, but what can you do for them?
Right.
Because, you know, you have to be very careful about messages that come across as greedy or grabbing with the market. And, you know, on that note, I've seen a lot of selling of pre-selling toxin units or a lot of gift cards, and we're starting to get requests for refunds. Not us, my practice, but I'm hearing about them in others. We chose not to do that, not to pre-sell. It's great for cash flow, but you have to be prepared for what you're going to say when someone says, you know, I can't buy groceries, or I can't pay my mortgage.
I've had that question come up, and I was going to ask, do you recommend pre-selling it currently?
You know, it's great for cash flow and loyalty to your practice. I just caution, be prepared. You're going to have to deliver those services and buy goods in order to deliver them on cash you've already collected and spent. And you also have to be prepared for the possibility of refund. And I know that from having practiced in previous recessions that refund requests are high, and demand for perfection is high. So you know, there are definitely more requests for tweaks, or, you know, my Botox didn't take as well as last time, and so, you know, can you give me a few more units, and I can't pay for them, and so on. So expectations will be higher for what they're paying for. You know, which leads to one of the things I wanted to address is that one of the trends will be, you know, you're going to have to get away from cookie cutter and more toward precision, because you're going to have to deliver good results. People are going to expect high value for their dollar, because the dollar has shrunk now.
Right, right. One of the subjects I wanted to bring up was the shift in customer expectation prior to COVID-19 and then moving forward. Dr. Rainone, you had some ideas of what customers' values might shift, buying habits might shift. Dr. Tantilo, we've talked about even the purchasing habits and the mix of services that they might request, even temporarily might shift, perhaps above eye level because we might be wearing masks, some of those things. So let me ask, how are customers' demand for services going to change?
Can I take that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Please.
Take that.
No,
Go ahead.
I think that, you know, I think I mentioned this on a previous post on my Instagram, that I think that people are going through an existential crisis through this. Not only is there going to be fear over spending money and job security, but now there's fear of illness and mortality. So the fear is gigantic. And so we're asking them to partake in a non-essential service, which in my opinion, is going to come under deeper judgment, consumption of non-essential services by others. And vanity will be even more shamed. But not to say that I'm bullish on the aesthetics industry. I think it will always do well. It has done well through very bad times, including the Depression, because people need to feel better. But things will shift a bit. And some of the trends I see, so do-it-yourself, DIY, became very popular during this. People are coloring their own hair. They're learning how to do professional makeup. They've been pushed to do home peels by the practices. They've learned how to make makeup look like they've gotten filler. And there was a webcast the other day about that. So I think a little shift from professional services to DIY. I think there'll be a shift from body to faces. Think about what you're seeing on camera. You're only seeing from here to here. And so if people have to prioritize, it'll be face over body because of the Zoom camera. I think that short procedures will take precedence over long procedures. Think about how little human contact you want when you go to the grocery store or the pharmacy. I saw a funny meme the other day that said, I turn corners in the grocery store with my cart like I'm in a haunted house. I think that looking youthful will take precedence over looking glamorous or edgy. I think that neurotoxin will take precedence over filler. No downtime will take precedence over downtime. Low touch over high touch. Natural over hyperinflated or frozen. And then that precision or that individualized or customized treatment over the cookie cutter or broad treatment.
We had a question come in regarding procedures like fractional lasers and where you might feel that they fit into the makeup of services now. Fractional ablative versus non-ablative lasers.
Yeah, ablative's a problem in the world of fear of job security. To have to take a couple of days off work because of how you look and fearing your job may not be there when you get back is just not going to happen, in my opinion.
And also, the physical, ablative procedure does cause damage to the skin, and you're exposing potential infection, bacteria, and we've got this virus. It's very easily spread, highly contagious. And then, so I think that we have to be careful because it's a novel virus. We don't know how people may react if they then get corona within a few days after like an ablative procedure. Same with the similar thinking towards the fillers, that it might change, just like Don said, that it's mostly going to be neurotoxins that we're going to be dealing with, because again, it's a fairly quick procedure. And this is like we said, this new fashion is probably going to be a mask for the next year and a half until we have a vaccine. So really, you're going to be only seeing the top third of somebody's face. And so they'll really, even when I'm at the hospital and everybody's covered up, I'm looking at everybody's glabella, and right. That's something that people will want to, keep looking fresh. And I do think, like you said, that they do feel guilty about wanting their Botox or or Dysport during these times. There's a certain guilt factor, but people feel bad. And we already know that neurotoxins have helped people with depression. Once they look better, they feel better. And there's research to show that. So this has been an unprecedented time, and people have been really down and stuck in their homes, and they want to feel good about themselves. And it's kind of like the lipstick effect that, I don't know when it was talked about in the Depression or whatever, where people right. would go out and spend money on a nice lipstick.
Yeah, it's actually been shown in a down economy, people spend more on low-cost vanity items like lipstick and makeup. Those sales actually increase. Dr. Tantilo, you do a wide spectrum of procedures, surgical and non-invasive. What are you saying? Do you feel like there's going to be a shift from one to the other?
Yeah, I think that particularly in the short run, over the next year or two, there is going to be a shift more towards smaller ticket items, less invasive procedures. For the two reasons that have been said, both health and, you know, financial for some people. You know, they don't want to go to the hospital. They don't even, maybe not even want to go to a surgery center, take the risk of the coronavirus. And then there's, you know, the financial implications of a larger procedure. So I would.
Right. So if I'm a provider right now and I can't do procedures, I can't see customers currently, do you think one of the things I should do is invest in some particular training, learn a new skill, be prepared to add services to meet the coming customer demand that might be shifting? What would be your recommendations, Dr. Tantilo?
Well, I think to echo what Don and Lara said, I think was really good. The first thing is to stay in touch with your current patients. I mean, that's going to be, I mean, that's your bread and butter. And those are the people that, you know, you've been with and have been with you in the past, and they'll stick with you, you know, through this downturn. So I think that, and however it is that is your style to reach out to them, I think is what you should do. But I think, you know, just showing your patients that you're there, you're thinking about them, you care. I think then to, you know, as we sort of come out of this, and, you know, before we get back to full business, but as people are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, I think more and more televisits, you know, teleconsults, we're starting to get, you know, the board where the new patients to the practice interested in starting with a televisit now and then following up with an in-person visit, you know, once we're back open for business.
That's great. Some real great takeaways about what you can do now. Stay in contact with your customer base. High touch and high communication is important. Being sincere with your customers and patient with your customers is important. I want to shift from where we are currently to where we need to head as an industry and talk about business models. Dr. Rainone, you had talked about, you believe that there may be a coming shift here where there's going to be some mergers, there's going to be some acquisitions, there's going to be a change in perhaps business structures. What do you think is driving that? You talked about some duplication of services, saturation in the industry. I want to talk about the business model and how this might impact companies as a whole.
Well, one of the things you're going to have to look at is your fixed costs. You can't do anything about your variable costs or your costs of goods sold because obviously as you deliver the service, you have to acquire the materials to deliver the service. But your fixed costs are something you can look at, and everybody needs to look at that with great austerity in the coming future. And we can't have the unbridled spending that we had last year with, you know, attendance of lavish conferences internationally and acquisition of multiple machines and lasers and lavish build out of offices and expansion. During this time, because, you know, I have 20 years of historical data, over 8,000 patients, and we know that the size of the ticket, the average ticket, shrinks during these recessions. And we already know that we're going to have to do some social distancing, which means spacing the patients apart. So now our density of visits will go down. So now if there's fewer visits and less per ticket, we're looking at reduced income. So we have to look hard at our fixed costs. Some of the fixed costs, as I had said, it involves a lot of duplication of services. So that somebody right across the street from another practice is offering the very same equipment, the very same services in nearly the very same way. There comes only a certain point where you can add so much value. You know, we talked about over the years that, oh, we're going to be better, we're going to deliver it in this way or that way, but you reach a peak where you can no longer deliver more value unless you incur a greater cost. You know,
right, and along those lines,
what are you going to do? Start giving out lobsters or cigars to, you know, you reach a point where you're really at a peak, and now you've got to look at your costs. And so that duplication I talked about, if you merge, you no longer now need to compete with all these mom and pops next door purchasing the very same equipment in order to keep up, spending money on marketing. You're losing the opportunity for economies of scale when you purchase your goods. Everything from your bottle of toxin down to an alcohol wipe is going to cost you more if you're smaller and you're not part of a larger group purchasing entity.
Right. I've seen prior to this healthcare systems, large healthcare systems really purchasing mid-sized systems. And we've seen other times in healthcare where it's the small practices that are being purchased. You feel like because the reduction in ticket item cost or the reduction in overall revenue, that's going to motivate larger practices to perhaps purchase smaller practices? Or do you think the motivation comes from the smaller practices saying, hey, I've got this fixed cost and I need out, I can't carry the overhead? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, size of practices brings up a whole nother subject. What happens during these crises or these big disruptions is there's no big fish and there's no little fish, there's just fish. Right. And, the Goliaths can become Davids and the Davids can become Goliaths. In fact, the little guy never had a better opportunity to swim ahead of the pack because, a speedboat is more nimble to change direction than a cruise ship. And,
right. Lara, you've experienced that where the practitioner has the loyalty with the patient base. The customer is with the practitioner. And so sometimes we see larger practices, they may furlough providers during this time. There's movement in the employment marketplace, a provider going from one practice to another. Sure, there's non-competes and there's non-solicitations, but the loyalty from the customer is to the provider. Do you see that to be the case? And what was your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we had bought the med spa, they did not have an injectable practice, so I had built that. And when we sold the spa, it was to a laser company who just wanted to focus on laser. I think they would have kept me on as the injector, but I kind of didn't want to work for somebody else because I was used to kind of being my own boss, and I wanted to charge my own destiny. So I the non-compete with them. I basically told my clients, I mean, by that point, people had my number. I wasn't changing my numbers, so they knew how to find me. It's the same with, I guess, when anybody leaves a business. If you have a relationship with whomever, you follow them, whether it's an accountant, whether it's a doctor, a primary care doctor, or a plastic surgeon, whoever, your dermatologist, you want to go with them if you've liked them and you've had a good relationship with them and you felt like you've been listened to and heard and they've liked your work, kind of thing. They'll follow you.
Right. It's a multifaceted conversation here. Kenji, I want to jump over to you and talk about business valuation. Say I'm a business owner and I'm considering selling my practice. What are some steps that I should go through? And on the flip side of that, if I'm a practice that I think I'm in a position to acquire other practices, what are some steps that I should go through?
Well, certainly when you're looking to either purchase or sell a practice, there's a lot of considerations that need to be taken into account for. So, certain things are, non-financial considerations. First off, if you're looking to acquire a practice, does that practice complement your personal strengths, your style, the services being performed and the patient base in line with your capabilities and your preference? Also consider too, what are the synergies that are available if you do merge? Other non-financial considerations are really just the risks inherent in a lot of these practices. Competition, location, size, strength of management, technology, procedure mix. It's a lot of things to consider. So, with that, if you're considering going this route, whether selling or purchasing a practice, I think an important thing to consider is, surrounding yourself with a really knowledgeable team, someone who's specialized in your industry, who understands the unique set of challenges that you're going to be going through, as well as the opportunities that are available. So just with assessing, these non-financial considerations, really just take the time, do the due diligence up front and evaluate the opportunity. Don't be afraid to request information and, do as much research as possible so you feel like you're making an informed decision. Now, to go off of that, once you kind of had a handle and consider all these non-financial factors, then we start digging into the numbers. And an important thing is that's going to be assessed are your financial statements and tax returns. And one thing that's really stressed is just the quality of the accounting records. We want to make a determination as to whether the information is accurate, reliable, and once we have confidence in those records, we can start assessing those numbers and really getting down to, all right, what is the cash flow that the business generates? So in many cases, in terms of how you value a practice, the value is really predicated on the cash flow business generates. And also it considers the inherent risks that are involved with the practice. So if you're looking at a practice, the higher the perceived risks, the higher the rate of return a prospective buyer would need to kind of compensate that investor for the risks, which will drive down a value. So those are some considerations at a high level that we want to just be aware of. So also,
can you speak to mergers versus acquisitions? Can you speak to mergers and why that might be more streamlined, or what, who that might be more agreeable to?
Well, I think mergers are definitely more agreeable to those who feel like they can find some synergies in terms of combining practices, as opposed to acting independently one-on-one. Like you mentioned, economy of scales. If there's ways that we can save on costs by combining practices together, that's always a strong consideration as to why two forces should join together as one.
Blake, if I could just pivot off of what Kenji was talking about, even if I think it's good to consider synergies with other practices or acquisitions, but even if that's not what you're considering, the exercise of going through your financials and seeing where your own practice is generating a good return and where your own practice is valuable or would be valuable to somebody else is a good exercise for everyone. And this is a great time to do it, is just to get with your accountant and go over your financial statements and see what returns on your invested capital or your committed capital, what you're getting for that, and where you can make that return better, where you can increase your cash flow, where you can increase the agility of your business. And I mean, Kenji can speak to this certainly better than I can, but I mean, the concepts are, if you think about your profit and loss statement, moving things up to the top from operating expense to cost of services. And on your balance sheet, it's moving things from long-term assets to short-term assets. And that makes you more nimble, more agile, more able to take advantage of opportunities that might come along in upsides, but also more able to withstand the economic downturns.
Yeah, and then just to go off what Dr. Tantilo said, really in order to understand your practice and how it's performing, one of the crucial things you should ensure that you're doing is maintain an accurate set of accounting records, make sure they're updated on a timely basis. Accurate accounting records allow a business to be able to prepare financial statements quickly and accurately, provide key information to control cash, revenue, expenses, and measure the business performance and really highlight the areas where problems could arise and enable remedies to be put in place quickly, allowing you to effectively manage your practice. A phrase that accountants like to refer to is you can only manage what you can measure. And with accounting records, it's really important that you have timely and accurate information which will allow you to pinpoint and resolve problems as they surface. And
just really good points.
And then just to go off that too, I also stress, just as if you guys are considering going into business or are a business owner, I can't stress the importance of just having a general understanding of accounting to really comprehend the information in your financial reports and records. It's accounting, they say it's the language of business.
Sure.
It's used to communicate your practice's financial information to owners and other external parties. So you really can't afford to have that financial illiteracy. A general understanding to read and interpret financial statements will really just enable you to effectively manage your practice and make those key decisions. That would be crucial.
We saw the importance of having clean and prepared books, even with the crisis taking place, because to apply for the paycheck protection program and any kind of economic relief, reaching out to bank, the first thing they're going to want to see is your financial statement, your balance sheet, your previous tax returns, in 940s to see what you were paying in salary in the case of the PPP. So in a crisis, it's important, but it's certainly important if you're considering mergers or acquisitions. It's the first step to say, well, what is this business really doing? What is this business? What is the valuation of this business? But I also want to transition that thought in financially looking at a company and looking for areas to reduce overhead. Where do you find within businesses that you see perhaps the potential for the most cost savings? Could you talk to me about, if I'm a business owner and I'm trying to reduce my overhead, what are some steps I could go about looking at the cost center of my business and perhaps reducing overhead cost?
Well, in looking at, major costs that are inherent in any sort of business, any sort of practice, overhead costs, you really are fixed costs, consisting of, rent, space, equipment. Those tend to eat up a good majority of your costs. And, think about what's involved in setting up, let's say a traditional space. You're going to be looking for a ideal location and space to rent. You're going to be negotiating a lease agreement, renovating space, making those leasehold improvements, furnishing the space, financing all this equipment. And, in many cases, if you're a startup, this is all happening before you even make your first dollar. Then you have to work, towards, making up those expenses and, bringing in enough revenue just to cover those even before you can make a profit. So, it can be very intimidating for someone going into practice and knowing that, all right, it's requiring this huge investment and risk, not knowing how you're going to be performing down in the future.
Right.
Enter
Right.
Vansanity, I think. I think that's the whole premise of the business model, that you have, especially for somebody who's just starting out. And that is a lot to take on, like you were just saying, Kenji, the lease and the renovations and cost of the lasers or any kind of machine that you want to add to your practice. So Vansanity, gives you that opportunity to have a great location, beautiful location, and rent the space as you need it. So as you get more and more clients, you're renting more hours, you're renting the laser more often. So it's a win-win for everybody. So it's kind of a great model. And I think that it's very unique, and I think that it's something that we're going to see more and more of.
Thanks, Lara. As Vansanity, we take the fixed overhead of your lease or your equipment, and we make it leasable by the hour. So it's a flexible cost rather than a fixed cost that's hard to get out of. Dr. Tantilo, can you talk about the importance of that, being able to maneuver from high fixed overhead to flexible scenario?
Yeah, I think it's important because I think any business that's agile is more resilient, and also more resilient to the downtimes, and the more cash you have on hand, the more you can also take advantage of opportunity that may come your way. So I think, and that not just in this sector, but in many sectors, we're seeing people and businesses think more about cash on hand and cash flow and the importance of those two things. You obviously see it in the Ubers and the Airbnbs and Amazon Web Services and things like that. So anything that a business can avoid buying but acquire in an on-demand and scalable, rentable fashion, most of the time, almost always, that tends to be beneficial to the business in the long run. It always is beneficial to the business's cash flow position, and that's almost always. There are very few appreciable assets in our businesses. So if it's not an appreciating asset, then we generally want to avoid sinking money into it as small business owners.
Right. So an alternative would be really sharing some of the fixed cost rather than incurring that within a practice. So looking for those opportunities, perhaps in the balance sheet, Kenji, would be a thing that you could do, and looking at what are my fixed assets, and perhaps if I merged with a practice, could we share some of these fixed assets, or could I do like Lara and go from a traditional setting to one that I'm more freelance in this environment? And Lara, I want to talk a little bit about the fixed cost of salaries and employees. You had employees at one point, and now you're more freelance. And then I also want to talk about the PPP and the impact of that. But if you don't mind, tell me, how did you shift from having a practice and employees and going to more of a freelance arrangement? How did that impact perhaps your revenue and your overall net profits and the stress? Just talk to me about the whole thing.
So, you know, when I owned the med spa, I was a co-owner. So there were 3 of us. So that's always a challenge too, when you're having more than one owner. And we did well. I mean, it was all new for all 3 of us. And, but because of those fixed costs that are so expensive, the rent, the laser, the utilities, everything, everything that we just were ready to do something. We were all ready to move on. At that point, I didn't want to, I'd worked so hard to build my aesthetic practice, and it was thriving, that I didn't want to give it up. And also my client said, well, what are you going to do? Because so I simplified things, really. It was all about, it was kind of a moment where I had to step back because I was working. It was too much for me. I was having that business. I still had a 20-hour position at the hospital. So I was working like a crazy person trying to have a family. So it's all about work-life balance. So I stepped back and just opened a small LLC, solo practice, made it simple. I only did injectables. I no longer had a laser. I said, it's too much. And I focused on that, and I went from there. And for me, it was great, and I was very happy with that. But enter Vansanity, it kind of gave me the opportunity to kind of grow the practice again because of having that physical space. I do have a physical space. It's a small studio in our home. We have a separate entrance. It's like a little apartment, basically. And it's worked out well, but it's something that my practice has grown organically. It's not been through marketing because, again, it is in my home and we live in a litigious society, and it's not something that I want to go crazy. So, but coming to Vansanity, I feel like I have the opportunity to grow because I do have that more professional space to see my clients in, and then again, get back into the laser, which I had done when I owned the other practice. So
yeah, our whole point is to give you a beautiful space that you can lease by the hour. So if you're spending money for the space for that hour, you're in front of a customer and you're driving revenue from that customer. There is no downtime, zero downtime cost. I want to ask the panel, have you applied for PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program? And if so, what were your plans on how well is that going to help your business stay afloat and move you forward? We had a question from one of our viewers that asked, how many have pursued the PPP, and then how are you going to utilize that to keep you in business?
And just to speak on that, a majority of my practices that I work with have applied for the PPP, and most of them have received funds at this point. But ultimately, this is a great opportunity to provide essentially a really favorable loan to a lot of practices. This is in essence, there's no guarantees, there's no collaterals. This is backed by the U.S. government, and essentially you can use these money towards these qualified costs, and if you can put them towards these qualified costs and hit these certain criteria, you're eligible for loan forgiveness. But at the end of the day, if portions of this loan don't get forgiven, it converts into a really favorable 2-year loan at a 1% interest rate. So, what's going to happen is we're going to get to a point where practices are going to, be up and running again, and it's not going to be like flipping a switch. We're going to be getting back to normal. We're going to be ramping up. And during these times, you know, a lot of practices, they're going to need capital, cash in place. So this loan provides a good opportunity to have this cash in place to help you ramp up and really get back to where you're producing at a normal level. So it's a really encouraging program. And for those of you who haven't applied at this point, I believe there's a second round going on with the PPP program, but I don't know how much funds are left. But seriously consider applying and reaching out to your banking contacts if you decide to do so.
So Kenji, can I ask you a question? Because I
Sure.
didn't apply for the first round because I didn't actually think I could be eligible, again, because I don't have all those fixed costs. I also don't have payroll, but I did think I was eligible for the economic injury disaster loan. And I know there was new funds that went in as of April 27th on Monday. And I've been in there, and every time I go in, it's kind of like a roundabout circle. You can't really get to the loan application. There's no loan application. So I don't know if it's better to go through my bank or...
Yeah, with the economic injury disaster loan, that's being facilitated directly by the SBA. So that functions as a traditional loan. I believe you can have a max of up to $2 million in loans at a interest rate of about 3.75% up to terms, I think, of like 30 years or so. But that's handled directly by the SBA, and they've been flooded with requests. So it's been kind of a headache for a lot of practitioners to get through and get the loans that they need. With this PPP program, because of the anticipated demand that was coming along with this program, the SBA actually recruited all these external banks to come in and help facilitate the program. So, you're going to have much better luck getting through with one of these banks as opposed to directly with the SBA. But in essence, to qualify for the loan forgiveness portion of this PPP, you have to use it towards qualified costs, the majority of it being payroll costs. And you can also use it for other type of expenses such as rent and utilities. However, if you don't use it towards these qualified costs or don't spend the funds, you go through the loan forgiveness application process. You have amount that might be forgiven, but if not, it converts to this really favorable loan that can help float your practice for about a 2-year period.
Right. Thank you for outlining that, Kenji. Have Dr. Rainone, Dr. Tantilo, have either one of you gone through that process and benefited from the program?
Yes. So I did go through the PPP. It was a fairly straightforward process, as Kenji was mentioning, because you can partner with your bank. So you typically have a person with whom you have a relationship helping you. The EIDL, as Kenji mentioned, has been a different story, that you just apply directly through the SBA, and a lot more anonymity there.
One thing that I wanted to look at was how we should look at acquiring patients moving forward, where we should spend money moving forward. Say I have or have not applied for these loans, getting back to work, getting business in front of you. What should we do as far as being prepared for the customer? Dr. Rainone, you mentioned the first month back may be a false positive, and that we may see an influx of patients and then a balancing back out. And then Lara, you and I, we've talked about pricing and how we shouldn't reduce our prices and cut into our profit margins. Let's have a discussion about getting back to work in front of our customers. What should we do to acquire new customers, grow our business, be in front of those customers? Dr. Rainone, why don't you talk first about your recommendations to increase perhaps value per procedure per hour?
Yeah, we're talking about looking at fixed costs. One of the things I do is I break my company up, its financials up into subunits, and pretend they're divisions of a great big company. So I have my laser division, I have my injectables division, and I look at P&L separately for those divisions, because I need to know how the subunits of the practice are performing, not just the overall P&L. And one of the metrics I apply, which is not too common, and I learned it from the gym industry or the health club industry, is revenue per square foot per hour. And that is, you know, are you wasting a lot of downtime in a room, or are there rooms that are not producing at all, producing very little? So, you know, I have very small space and I run it very efficiently, and have cut procedures out in the past that underperform the other procedures. You also want to look at your cost of goods sold for individual procedures and know what every single procedure costs you per procedure. As far as marketing and you know, bringing patients in, and you know, I think that new patients create a situation in that they take more time in the office. Again, we're back to that short visit situation, and that's where you may want a hybrid visit, where you do part of it by telemedicine for the intake, and then it will cut the procedure time down. You know, there's that whole other counseling or part of the job where a lot of people look to their aesthetic provider as, you know, they discuss their family situations, their problems, their crises, because the same way they do to a hairdresser or a massage therapist. So that's going to be tough because of the shorter visits required, or you know, the spacing apart of people. And that's where the telemed portion could come in handy. As far as marketing, you know, I think, again, back to keep your current client base loyal, build that bond. Some people are tying them in financially with, you know, memberships, or and then again, the selling of gift cards. Those things create a financial commitment, but more than that, it needs to be an emotional commitment. And then beyond that, as far as, you know, I think there's a term in marketing: don't try to boil the ocean, which means don't try to reach out and market to everyone out there to try to capture new patients, because I think there's going to be even more skepticism to the people who were afraid to try this procedure before. And so you're going to have to rely on the ones that have tried it or have some experience with it. It was alluded to earlier that those that are obsessed or addicted or very reliant on these procedures are going to come barreling in the door the first month. And so, again, you know, it's been warned by many different professionals not to look at those first month's metrics as an indication of the rest of the year, because there's going to be some rebound effect of the pent-up demand. So who do you go after? And you know, in my practice, what I'm going to do, and I suggest, is look at niche markets. You know, what are those professions that absolutely rely as a necessity on their appearance? And these would be realtors. They're going to be starting to show houses again. Executives, people who work from home or on the Zoom camera all day long. Personal trainers.
I like those ideas. Those are some low-cost marketing initiatives that you can go out and network with your hairdresser, your barber, other people, that your fitness trainer that might know potential customer base, business people, business networking. That could be low-cost marketing. Lara, what about yourself? What are some marketing initiatives that you're taking? And then I know you have a perspective that I really like. This is not a time to discount your services. Maintain those profit margins.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like Don said, really maintaining the relationships you have with your current clients, and really, when they love you, they tell two friends, and so on and so on. And really, word of mouth marketing, I mean, obviously doesn't work as quickly as when you put out a huge campaign, but you know, you often get really quality, great clients that come to you and then become very loyal. Marketing, yeah, Boston Businesswomen, I joined it, I think, March 10th, just before this all imploded, but I did see that as a really great opportunity to meet successful business women who are out there who are wanting to look good. And what do they need? They need some injectables. So that has been a marketing, you know, and again, it hasn't come to fruition because, you know, everything happened. So there was going to be lots of opportunities to network and, you know, meet and things like that. So I've been participating in webinars and things like that just to try to meet. But I think it's a great way for somebody like me to market. Low cost marketing too, really.
Right. And maintaining,
and marketing really is maintaining my relationships. So I actually, you know, I actually finally made, because of Vansanity, I finally decided to leave my benefited position at the hospital and kind of go like full on medical aesthetics. I did keep a per diem position, and some people think that's crazy, but to me, I like being a part of a large organization like the Brigham and Women's Hospital where I work, and it's, for me, talking about marketing, I have a huge pool of people that I work with. I mean, the labor and delivery unit has 125 nurses and probably like 100 physicians and, you know, secretaries and all that. So that's like marketing, just being there, you know, and talking to people and things like that. And, you know, these are people with disposable income too. So
Right.
there's a
Now,
method to my madness.
Dr. Tantilo, talk with me a little bit about when we get back to work at Vansanity, how Vansanity is going to take some procedural steps to make sure that we keep things sanitized, minimize customer interaction, human contact. What are some things that every practice should consider, but certainly what we're doing in Vansanity to make it a safe environment?
Absolutely. I mean, that's going to be on the forefront of everyone's mind. And, you know, we've talked about it amongst ourselves. I mean, we will take everybody's temperature who comes into Vansanity. We'll provide masks to the patients, the clients, the providers. Certainly, our employees will have masks on. We have the luxury of having a very large space. So we have a big waiting room where 6 to 8 feet apart in the chairs is sort of the norm. You know, we have a number of exam rooms. They're big. So it's one provider is going in with one patient at a time into the exam rooms. We'll have enhanced cleaning in between, you know, the patient visits. We have 5 exits so people can, you know, go out different ways. So yeah, we're like everyone, we're very attuned to it. You know, fortunately, because of, you know, our space, just serendipity, we have the luxury of having, you know, a lot of square footage and a lot of different rooms here that we can separate the visits, separate the practitioners and the patients from one another pretty easily.
Great, I appreciate that. And Dr. Rainone, are you taking any precautions with your patients or steps to make it a safe environment, comfortable environment?
Yeah, I think beyond the CDC guidelines and whatever your state is suggesting and the various societies, I think for me, what I did is try to see it through the consumer or the patient or the client's eyes. And that is, they've had some time now to experience consuming services from essentials over the past 6 weeks. So what expectations have been set by the essentials that they're going to expect to see now when they partake in non-essential? And so there's just certain parameters or certain visuals that they're going to want to see and feel to feel comfortable, because it's all about perception and them feeling comfortable. You know,
Right.
beyond the basic checklist, once you've managed the checklist, what else is it that they see, feel, or hear that will make them feel comfortable? We put a plexiglass sneeze guard up because that's what people are used to seeing in the pharmacies and the grocery stores and the post offices. You know, that's optional. It's not mentioned in anything, but we put that at our checkout desk. You know, sometimes it gets very difficult to get people not to loiter at the desk there, and if somebody's around more than you know, the amount of time that you're encouraging them to move along, that creates another barrier for protection.
Right, right.
Just to add to that, now, at least in this day and age with technology, we're very lucky, and that some of the other things that I'll be doing is, you know, in terms of when I'm confirming a patient's appointment the day prior, I'll be asking them all the usual COVID questions, you know, prior to, so that if they've had any kind of unusual symptoms, even like the loss of sense of the smell or taste, that's, you know, really kind of indicative. It could be they might have a low viral load, but anyway, so some of those questions beforehand will be very important, as well as being able to send them their you know, intake forms or consent forms via email, and they can sign those and return them to you. So there's really no contact where they have to touch a computer or touch any paper or pen. And same with paying. We don't have a check. At Vansanity, it's a little different because they pay you directly, the provider. So again, you don't have to touch the iPad. You know, they can swipe their card, or you can manually enter their card in your computer to be paid. Of course, you pay a little bit more when you don't slide the card, but whatever. It's a price you have to pay.
Speaking of sliding cards, does anybody know what Venmo, Uber, Instagram, Square, and Groupon all have in common?
No.
They were all born out of the 2008 recession. And so it's important to realize that out of chaos comes creativity. And I want to, as we approach the end of the call, put out a request for innovation out there, because I think that, under pressure or under these types of situations, new ideas are born. And, look at all of the pinch points for your patients or your clients into accessing cosmetic services, and think of ways to what will make it better, and what do they really want in the end. Look at the end point and then back it up from there, rather than focusing on a syringe of this or a unit of that, or where to put it, and anatomy and all that. Think more about what are they feeling, what are their pinch points or their pain points with getting into the system, and then what are they really looking for. And so I think we're going to do well. I think it's going to be great. I think that the Spanish flu, right? 1918-19 was it? It gave us the Roaring '20s, and the bubonic plague gave us the Renaissance. I think we're gonna do great once we get through the next 6, 12, or 18 months. But there's going to be some adjustments, and there's going to be some change. But I'm putting a call out for creativity and innovation. See what you can come up with. I mean, I partnered for this call because I think that Vansanity created something really special and unique and innovative in an industry that is doing a lot of copycat, and me too, a lot of FOMO activity. This person's doing this, so I better do that, rather than trying to come up with something new. And so, I participated in the WeWork space, the shared office space in Boston, for health tech conferences, gatherings, and to see it put in place for aesthetics was a truly innovative concept. There haven't been too many. Another one I think worth mentioning is, the complexity of the menu and of what is available for cosmetic services. I think LexRx, to mention a practice, came up with a great idea to simplify the menu into just several options with clever names, as opposed to this massive confusing menu. So these types of innovations, I think, are the future, and I would love to see what people come up with.
That's a really great positive point that I think we can end our conversation with. If adversity drives innovation, then a crisis is going to create opportunities. And I would like to leave all of you on a positive note. Let this be an opportunity not to overthink, but to simplify, value the important things that really matter to you and your family, and really reach out to your customers and make that personal connection, because that's what we're missing most at this time. For Vansanity, if you want to learn more about Vansanity, visit vansanity.com. All of our panel members are welcoming conversations and questions, so we'll provide that contact information. We've recorded this conversation, and we appreciate you joining in on the conversation. We will share this recording with you, and we will share contact information with everyone after the conversation. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, panel members, for having this conversation, driving the conversation. Greatly appreciate everyone's time.
Thanks, Blake.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Day.
You're very welcome.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
You too.
Yes.